What if I told you that addiction isn't a curse, but a languager? Hidden way through which God communicates with those he has chosen. I've uncovered a truth so profound that conventional religion would struggle to accept it. Addiction is not merely a flaw or weakness. It is the subtle voice of a higher power. It's trying to awaken something dormant within the soul. While most see addiction as punishment, I view it as a spiritual dialogue. The relentless cravings, the obsessions, the guilt, the cycles of falling and rising, they are not random. They are messages from the divine, intended to transform those ready to face them. Every addiction carries a message, a secret code decipherable only by those strong enough to confront it. Whether it's alcohol, lust, control, ambition, or pain, these are not accidents. They are symbols of a deeper hunger, pointing toward what the soul has forgotten. Only souls marked by divine purpose feel this inner fire with such intensity. Have you ever felt imprisoned by your desires, yet unable to release them? That paradox is proof of a higher design. The more you resist what you crave, the further you drift from its lesson. Addiction is not meant to destroy you, it is meant to reveal you. God speaks through the turmoil of your compulsions, through the urges that confuse you. He speaks in the quiet moments after every fall, when you no longer recognize yourself, because that is when transformation begins. Before condemning your addiction, pause and listen. It may be the most intimate conversation you'll ever have with God, one that only chosen souls can perceive. There is a hunger inside you that nothing seems to satisfy. You attempt to fill it with substances, relationships, accomplishments, or distractions. Yet the emptiness returns, deeper and more demanding. I call this the spiritual thirst. Every addiction begins as a search for something sacred, something lost. When you reach for that drink, substance, or forbidden pleasure, it is not weakness. You are responding to a call you do not yet understand. Your soul is crying out for meaning, and addiction is the language it speaks. This thirst is ancient. It's present in humanity from the very beginning. But only certain souls feel it with such intensity, those who carry the relentless craving that will not be ignored. These are the chosen ones, marked by a divine restlessness that refuses to let them settle for an ordinary life. Most people can indulge without becoming addicted. Most can experience pleasure without losing themselves. You cannot, and that is not a flaw. That unquenchable thirst is proof that something greater is reaching for you, guiding you toward a transformation you resist. I discovered that alcoholics, in particular, carry a distinct spiritual wound. Their addiction is never truly about alcohol itself. It is an attempt to touch something transcendent, something beyond the ordinary reality that feels too small for their souls. They drank to feel connected, to feel alive, to escape the suffocating emptiness of a world that seemed devoid of wonder. Yet the irony was clear. The very addiction they turned to for relief became the barrier to fulfillment. The thing they used to soothe their thirst only deepened it. They drank to feel whole, yet each drink fractured them further. They chased fleeting highs to avoid pain, but those highs intensified it. This cycle, paradoxical and relentless, appeared almost designed to break them, but I believed it was purposeful. This cycle was not random. Chaos, it was a deliberate mechanism, a spiritual test crafted for those strong enough to endure it. Not everyone experiences this test because not everyone requires this lesson. For those who do, the message is consistent. What you seek externally exists only within. The thirst is real, but the search has been misdirected. Material solutions cannot satisfy spiritual needs. You have tried to fill a void with things that can never fit, and every attempt only widens the gap, intensifying the longing and leaving you feeling more lost. Many surrender at this point, seeing the endless cycle and concluding they are broken, cursed, or unworthy. I saw it differently. The intensity of the craving corresponds to the depth of one's calling. Greater suffering signals greater potential for awakening. This unquenchable thirst is not punishment, it is preparation. God communicates with those chosen through this relentless hunger, teaching them the most vital truth. Nothing in this world's success, love, power, or pleasure will ever be enough. Once this truth is understood, The approach shifts. The thirst is no longer about filling oneself, but about emptying oneself. Escape turns into encounter. What once drove destruction becomes the gateway to an unimaginable connection with the divine, the source that has always been calling. But this transformation cannot occur while resisting or drowning in guilt and shame. Addiction is not the enemy. It is a teacher, a guide, a persistent thorn pushing one inward to confront what has long been avoided. Nothing external can satisfy this thirst. That is the harsh reality, yet there is hope. It was never meant to be satisfied externally. The thirst is the call. The craving is the invitation. Your addiction is the only force strong enough to compel you to finally confront yourself. You've attempted to quit countless times. You've promised yourself, promised others, perhaps even promised God, that this time would be different. Yet time and again you relapse. Each setback feels like proof of your weakness, a signal that you are too broken or too far gone to be saved. But what if falling isn't the opposite of rising? What if every relapse is actually a step forward on a journey you haven't yet fully understood? I came to see that the repeated cycle of addiction isn't a sign of failure, but a necessary confrontation with the parts of yourself you've long avoided. I call this the encounter with the shadow, the dark side of your personality. These are the aspects of yourself that you deny, reject, and bury deep beneath the surface. Your anger, shame, fear, and hidden desires. Addiction has a way of bringing these buried truths into the open. Every time you fall, you are confronted with something real about yourself, something you might never face if life were easy. An addict cannot hide behind social masks or polite facades. Addiction strips away all defenses until you stand naked before yourself and before God. That is the point. Most people go through life without truly knowing themselves. They construct identities based on societal expectations, safety, or approval. But those marked by addiction don't have that luxury. They are drawn into the depths, whether they wish to go or not. And each relapse takes them further in. I realize that this descent is sacred. Across myths and spiritual traditions, the hero must descend into the underworld before ascending to the heavens. They must face monsters, demons, and the aspects of themselves they fear most. Only then can they claim their true power and be reborn. Your addiction is your underworld. Every relapse peels away another layer, shatters another illusion, and destroys another false self. It feels like death, and in some ways, it is. But death is not the end. It is the beginning of transformation. And God often speaks most clearly in the moments when you feel utterly lost. The falling is not random, it follows a pattern, a rhythm that carries a profound spiritual message. You rise with hope, then fall into despair. You rise again with determination, only to fall again under the weight of guilt. This cycle repeats, and each turn teaches something essential. You cannot save yourself through willpower alone. Discipline, control, or sheer determination will not suffice. This is one of the hardest lessons for the chosen ones to learn, because many of you are fighters. You are strong, capable, and accustomed to overcoming obstacles through sheer force of will. But addiction does not yield to force. The harder you resist it, the stronger its hold becomes. The more you fight, the tighter its grip. Thus, you must learn to stop fighting and start surrendering. Surrender is not giving up. It is recognizing that you are facing a force greater than your ego, one that demands a different kind of strength. It means admitting that you need help, that you cannot walk this path alone. The way forward is not always upward, requires descending further into darkness, into the unknown, into the parts of yourself you have long avoided. Those who ultimately break free from addiction do so not by conquering it, but by integrating it. They stop seeing their shadow as the enemy and begin to view it as a part of themselves that must be understood, accepted, and transformed. They stop resisting the fall and start learning from it. Each time you collapse, you are given a gift, a chance to see yourself clearly, to understand why you crave what you crave, why you run from what you run from, and why you hurt the way you do. With each fall, if you are willing to observe, you move closer to the truth that will set you free. The path is rarely a straight line upward. It is a spiral that winds downward and then upward again, repeatedly, until you reach the center. At the center, you find what you have been seeking all along, not in the substance, not in the high, not in the escape, but in the person you become through the journey of falling and rising, breaking and healing, dying and being reborn. There's a part of you that watches quietly from the corners of your mind. It knows every secret you keep, every lie you tell yourself, every moment of weakness you pretend never happened. This is not your conscience. It is something older, something deeper. I call it the shadow, and it has been with you since birth. Growing stronger with each truth you refuse to face, your addiction feeds on this hidden shadow. It thrives in the darkness of the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge, the anger you suppress, the pain you ignore, the desires you consider shameful. All of this gets buried in a concealed place, quietly growing stronger until one day it bursts out in ways you cannot control. Many think addiction is a sign of weakness. I saw it differently. I realized that addiction is your shadow's way of demanding attention. It isn't trying to destroy you, it is trying to be noticed, heard, and recognized. What you refuse to face in the light will inevitably consume you in the dark. Each craving carries a message from your shadow. When you reach for that drink, that drug, or that harmful behavior, you are not merely seeking escape or pleasure. You are responding to a part of yourself that has been silenced for too long, a part holding truths you fear to confront. A part that knows exactly who you are beneath the masks you wear. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding their shadow. They create comfortable routines, surround themselves with distractions, and rarely confront the darkness within. But God does not choose these individuals for this journey. He chooses those who cannot hide, whose shadows refuse to stay buried, whose inner darkness grows so loud it drowns out everything else. This is why your addiction feels so overpowering, so unmanageable, so impossible to resist. It is more than a habit or a chemical dependency, is your shadow demanding acknowledgement. And the more you resist it, judge it, or despise yourself for it, the stronger it becomes. Shadows expand in proportion to the light you attempt to force upon them. I discovered something revolutionary. You cannot eliminate your shadow. You cannot pray it away, discipline it away, or shame it away. The only path forward is integration. You must face the darkness, confront it directly, and name it. You need to acknowledge the parts of yourself you have long denied, the anger, selfishness, fear, weakness, and desires you were taught to reject. This is challenging work. It demands a courage that most people will never need. When you finally confront your shadow, you encounter everything you were taught to despise. You see the monster you believed you could never become. You confront truths that society, family, and religion insisted you hide. At that moment, you face a choice: reject it again and fall deeper into addiction, or accept it and begin the process of transformation. Those chosen to bear this burden have the capacity to handle it. Not everyone can confront their shadow and survive. Not everyone can face their own darkness without being consumed. But for those struggling with addiction, there is no choice. Their shadow will not allow them to rest. It will push, demand, and dismantle everything they build until they stop running and face it. When you finally turn toward it, something unexpected occurs. The shadow does not destroy you. Instead, it reveals strengths you never realize, talents you ignored, and truths you feared to express. Within your darkness lies the core of who you truly are, stripped of pretense and conditioning. Once you integrate it, addiction begins to lose its hold. Addiction only dominates when you are divided against yourself, when part of you wants to stop, but another part resists. This inner conflict exhausts you, and addiction feeds on that exhaustion. Making peace with your shadow ends this war. Understanding yourself rather than fighting yourself brings relief. Integration, not perfection or purity, is the goal of true spiritual growth. Wholeness comes from accepting all aspects of yourself, light and dark, good and bad, noble and shameful. This is the essence of being human. This is what the divine teaches through the harsh lessons of addiction. Your shadow knows you intimately, because it is the real you, not the version shown to the world. But the self beneath conditioning and fear? Until you acknowledge it, speak its name, and claim it, you cannot be free. Addiction persists because the shadow demands recognition. But when you confront it, the process transforms. Cravings that once controlled you become guides to your hidden self. The addiction that once destroyed you becomes the catalyst for your greatest growth. The shadow that once terrified you becomes your most trusted guide into your soul. The bottle promises peace, but delivers chaos. The substance offers freedom, but brings chains. The behavior promises pleasure, but delivers pain. This is the fundamental illusion of addiction, and I came to understand it fully. What you desire is never what you truly need. You already sense this? Each time you give in to the craving, there is a brief sense of relief, perhaps even a fleeting joy, but it never lasts. Our source, sometimes minutes later, the emptiness returns, stronger and more demanding than before. And you find yourself back at the starting point, now burdened with guilt and shame. This cycle is not accidental. It is deliberate. The craving is never truly about the substance or the behavior itself. It points to something absent within you, something missing for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like. I call this the God-shaped void. In my view, every addiction is ultimately a misdirected search for the divine. You seek transcendence in a bottle, meaning in a high love, in actions that isolate you. The direction is flawed, but the impulse is sacred deep inside. You sense that there is something more, something greater, beyond the ordinary flow of life. You are willing to pursue it at any cost, even if it harms you. This is why simple advice never works. People urge you to stop, exercise willpower, or weigh the consequences, but they fail to understand that addiction is not about the object itself. It is about what it symbolizes, a substitute for the spiritual connection you have lost, or perhaps never experienced. When you drink, you are not merely drinking. You are attempting to dissolve the barriers between yourself and the infinite. When you use substances, you are not simply chasing a high. You are trying to escape the limits of your perception. When you engage in destructive behaviors, it is not mere pleasure you seek. You are trying to feel alive in a world that has rendered you numb. I observed this pattern in every addict I encountered. They were not morally weak or inherently flawed. They were spiritually hungry in a world that had forgotten how to nourish the soul. They sought God in the wrong places because no one had shown them where to look. Addiction, then, is both the problem and the guides, simultaneously harming you and revealing what you truly need. The tragedy is that what you crave will never satisfy the deeper need beneath it. You could drink an ocean and still remain thirsty. You can chase every pleasure and still feel empty. You can repeat the same behavior countless times and remain disconnected, because you are trying to fill an infinite hunger with finite things. Material solutions cannot satisfy spiritual needs. It will never work. Yet, this realization carries a profound message. Your dissatisfaction is not a curse. It is a signal. It is God whispering through your unrest, showing you that you were created for something greater. Your inability to find contentment in ordinary pleasures reflects your extraordinary purpose. You are marked by a divine restlessness, a force that will not let you settle until you discover what you are truly seeking. In fact, I believe that addicts are often closer to God than most because of this hunger. They cannot settle for shallow pleasures or comfortable illusions. They crave something authentic, something deep that can truly fill the emptiness. While their methods may be destructive, the instinct is correct. There is something more, and it is worth the pursuit. Transformation begins when you stop trying to satisfy the craving and start examining it. Before reaching for the substance, pause and ask, what am I really seeking? What do I hope this will provide? Connection, peace, escape, meaning? Then take it further. Where can I genuinely find that? At this moment, addiction can shift from being a master to becoming a teacher. The craving signals unmet needs, unhealed wounds, and unfulfilled longings. Instead of fighting or judging it, you listen. You treat it as meaningful insight into your inner world. Gradually, you learn to separate the surface desire from the deeper need beneath it. What you crave is not what you truly need. Alcohol is not the answer. Drugs are not the solution, and behaviors cannot cure the underlying emptiness. But the craving, when understood, becomes a guide, showing exactly what is missing, what your soul longs for, and where your attention must go. When you finally provide what your soul truly needs, feeding it instead of feeding the addiction, something shifts. The craving does not vanish instantly, but its intensity changes. It becomes less consuming, less desperate, because you are no longer trying to fill a spiritual void with material things. You are addressing the true hunger that has driven you all along. There is a wound within you that never fully heals. You may have tried to numb it, ignore it, or cover it with distractions, achievements, and relationships. Yet it remains raw, open, and persistent beneath the surface of your carefully managed life. Some wounds are not meant to heal in the usual sense. They are not accidents, mistakes, or punishments. They are sacred marks, placed deliberately on certain souls for a specific purpose. These wounds are doorways, and addiction repeatedly draws you back to confront them, whether you wish to or not. Pain is a part of life for most people. Everyone goes through loss, betrayal, disappointment, and trauma. But for some people, the pain goes far deeper. It becomes a part of their identity, shaping their choices, influencing their relationships, and fueling behaviors that harm them. And often, no amount of therapy, medication, or positive thinking seems to reach that level of hurt. This is the sacred wound. It is the thorn that remains no matter how much you want it gone. It is the weight you carry that sets you apart from those around you. For a long time I believed this wound was the cost of being chosen, the mark that separates those meant for ordinary paths from those called to profound transformation. Your addiction is directly tied to this wound. When the pain grows overwhelming, you turn to your substance. When the wound reopens, you look for an escape. The addiction and the wound move together, each one sustaining the other, trapping you in a cycle that feels unbreakable. But here's what I learned. The wound is not your enemy. It is one of your greatest teachers. Every time it aches, every time it reappears, every time it reminds you of its presence, it is pointing you towards something important about your purpose. Within the wound is the very lesson you came to understand. One, you may eventually help others heal and transform into wisdom. Consider this. The deepest wounds create the deepest awareness. Someone who has never faced abandonment cannot fully understand a person who has. Someone who has never felt overwhelming shame cannot genuinely sit with someone lost in it. But you can. Your wound has allowed you to experience layers of human suffering that many will never grasp. And this access is not accidental. It has intention behind it. God allows His chosen ones to be wounded in certain ways, because they are meant to reach certain people. Your pain is not pointless. It is preparation. Every moment spent in darkness, every night filled with tears, every time you felt ready to give up, you were being trained. Trained to understand, to empathize, and to guide those who will one day walk a path similar to yours. You cannot access this gift while you are still resisting the wound. As long as you try to erase it, see it as a flaw, or believe that healing means never feeling pain again, the transformation cannot occur. True healing does not mean the wound disappears, it means changing your relationship with it. The sacred wound becomes sacred when you stop viewing it as weakness and start seeing it as strength. It becomes sacred when you stop asking why it happened to you and instead ask what it is meant to teach you. It becomes sacred when you stop insisting it must close and instead learn to live with it open, using it as a source of compassion rather than shame. This is profoundly difficult work because every part of you wants the pain to end. You long to be normal, free from this burden, to live without the constant ache in your chest. But the wound resists. It reopens, demands attention, and draws you back into the very pain you wish to escape. Addiction often becomes the only temporary relief. I observe this clearly. The addict flees from the wound into the addiction, yet eventually the addiction brings them back to it. It is a harsh cycle, yet a sacred one, because each return allows you to see the wound differently, understand it more deeply, and recognize that it does not destroy you, it refines you. Those chosen to carry wounds that resist healing do so for a reason. These wounds are not meant to remain closed forever, but to serve as channels, pathways, and points of connection between their pain and the pain of others. A wound that will not close becomes the conduit for grace. It becomes the crack where light enters, the broken place where healing begins for everyone you touch. But first, you must stop fighting it. Stop hating yourself for being wounded. Stop believing that your pain disqualifies you from purpose. Stop treating sensitivity as weakness or struggles as failure. The wound is not proof of abandonment. It is proof that you are marked for something you cannot yet see. Your addiction has protected you from the full force of this wound. It has acted as a buffer, a shield, a way to survive pain that once felt unbearable. Perhaps it was even necessary for a time. Perhaps you needed that protection until you were strong enough to face what lay beneath. Yet over time, that very protection can become a prison. What once helped you survive may eventually stop you from truly living. When you are ready, when the pain of remaining the same outweighs the fear of change, you begin to approach your wound differently. Not with hatred or shame, but with curiosity. Not demanding it vanish, but asking what it wants to teach you. In that moment of turning toward rather than away, everything shifts. The wound may not close, but it transforms. It becomes less about your personal suffering and more about the shared human experience. It shifts from what was done to you to what you can offer others. It becomes the source of your greatest gift, the ability to sit with someone in their darkest moment and silently communicate. I have been here. You are not alone. This is why God speaks to certain individuals through addiction and wounds that refuse to heal. Only those who have descended into the deepest darkness can guide others out. Only those who have carried unbearable pain can help others bear theirs. And only those who learn to live with a sacred wound can show that brokenness is not the end, but the beginning of a new story. Now you stand on the edge of understanding, reflecting on all that the fire has revealed. The thirst that could not be quenched was teaching you that nothing external will ever truly satisfy. The falls that felt like failure were actually the descent needed to meet your truest self. The shadow that terrified you was waiting to be acknowledged, integrated and transformed into a guide instead of a tormentor. The cravings that consumed you always pointed towards something deeper, something sacred that you had been seeking in the wrong places. The wound that refused to heal became the very crack through which your light now shines. This is the truth few dare to speak. Your addiction was never the enemy, was the messenger. God does not speak to everyone in such devastating ways, but you needed it. You were chosen not for comfort, but for transformation. Not for ease, but for depth. Not for a simple life, but for a path that would forge you into something unbreakable. Every moment of suffering, every relapse, every shame-filled morning, every desperate prayer, which was preparation. You were being trained in darkness to carry light into places where others cannot go. The conversation is not over. God is still speaking through your struggles, your questions, and your ongoing journey. But now you can finally hear him not in the noise of addiction, but in the silence that follows the running. Not in the high, but in the emptiness the high could never fill. Not in escape, but in the repeated return to yourself. No matter how many times you fall, you are awake now. And that changes everything.